Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce our panel of visually impaired specialists. In the upper left, we have Sarah Crutchlow, who is a visually impaired consultant and an orientation and mobility specialist. Right below her, we have Mary Stapp, who basically holds the same credentials. And on your lower right, we have Dr. Rosemary Stowers, who essentially has those same things. Sarah and Mary work in the public schools right now, and Rosemary works at the VA Center in Chicago. So what I wanted to talk to them about right now is all three have had extensive experience working with kids that either have some sort of a visual impairment or are perhaps blind, working in the local schools. And I would just like to talk about, you've all had an opportunity to read about some of the types of devices for kids with visual impairments, but I'd like to get a little bit of their input on those devices that they used out in the schools and how that worked implementing those things. So who would like to start? Sarah, you want to start us off?
Okay, sure. Oh, you just want me just to talk
Sure.
in general?
What kind of things have you used with kids? Now, I know that I've worked with these ladies for quite a long time, and some of the things that we've worked on were magnification devices. We've worked on software, JAWS. Students saw the JAWS software, but what kind of things do you use a lot with your students, Sarah?
Well, it depends on what school district you're in and if the school district has a lot of financial support or not. But iPads are used quite a bit. They're used quite often with a lot of different students who are blind and low vision. And then we also use closed circuit televisions where it's the magnifier that's on an arm, and it comes with sometimes with like a 19-inch TV screen. That one's used often as well. And that lets students do both near and distance.
So they have the opportunity to point that magnifier down, say on a book, or else point it forward and be able to see what's on the board.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Those are the two. Right now, the iOS system is used the most often, is what I'm seeing in the classrooms that I'm in.
So how do they exactly use that, the iOS systems?
Well, if it's their iPads, it's a lot of apps connecting with the teacher. So whatever the teacher's putting up on the board can also be put up on the student's iPad. And it's also just using different apps where they get books that they can have read to them at the same time, or where they can enlarge the font, make the font smaller, or not smaller, but bold. They can change the font background, could be white and the print is black, or it could be black and the print is white or yellow. That's another popular one, black background with yellow.
The contrast. Mm-hmm. So are these students then using, I guess this is for anybody, Bookshare?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep. Well, the iPad then again is a good, I try to get the largest screen one available, if we can. Again, we have students with budget or schools with budgets, but as a rule, I've been having pretty good luck lately with the larger screen iPad, and then you can get Bookshare on there. Sometimes there's other like a lot of teachers are using electronics now, Google Classroom, so you want the apps on there as well. Google Classroom is not that accessible, so that was a bit of a trick, we have to use, there's a lot of built-in things that you can use, but like for accessibility enlargements and stuff, but Google Classroom didn't seem to enlarge with some of the general settings. So so sometimes like I've had to resort to using a Chromebook with accessible settings for a student for like a particular use, but definitely the books. It's a pretty versatile magnifier. It's not like the awesomest at best. Like maybe your closed circuit TV, the CCTV, or the video magnifier would be like the clearer, crisper picture. And for like sitting at a desk, it works pretty good. But the iPad is so lightweight. It looks like everybody else's tech. And when kids, that really matters, you know, they like to look like everybody else. And then they can snap a lot of pictures. Like I have a student that wouldn't know how to do anything, but she would definitely use her, you know, the iPad camera to snap pictures. And there's a good magnifier built in. There's a lot of other apps like, because we teach independent living skills too, which is like, you know, different than just academic stuff, but there's life skills involved in that. It goes with our orientation mobility stuff too. But like maps, using it for that, navigation, but that would be more like an iPhone because it's a little more portable. But color identification things, I don't know, gosh, I don't know, we just even to look up things. But the iPad is the pretty, you know, pretty good. And also it does have voiceover. And so I could ramble on, maybe let someone else talk, but voiceover is also a really good thing. There's braille displays you can put with it. I mean, it's a pretty versatile tool. But personally, I do kind of like some kids really need a keyboard, you know, to put in all their stuff. And the iPad keyboard is often there. Maybe you can get one that's a little bigger, but I kind of like it all set up with a laptop and a screen reader. And the screen reader is just something that tells you what's on your screen. And there's a lot of hotkeys. And instead of using the mouse, you would use shortcut keys to get where you want to on the iPad. But there, I'll let someone else talk. Any more ideas?
Well, so I guess I have a question on I mean, back I remember, Rosie, not that long ago, we were buying special dedicated magnification devices for our kids. Are we at a point where an iPad can compete with those?
Somewhat. I think it really depends on, do they need it for items out in the community? Do they need to magnify price tags? Do they need, what are their near and distance vision needs when they're out in the community? So there are some smaller handheld electronic magnifiers that work really well, that students can adjust the font size, they can change their background. And that's like on the adult end of the spectrum. Now that I worked with kids in the adult end, they have a whole toolbox of different items that they're going to be using, such as those handheld video magnifiers for some other simple task. And sometimes they're using those magnifiers to look at their cell phone screen.
Okay.
So those are some of the things that I've noticed.
Are you seeing this technology replace, say, printed books, large format printed books?
Yes. I think there are kids though, like that just really prefer a page, and some, it's very, you might have the same visual, let's say, diagnosis or even the same acuity, but often it's really very personal. Some kids really prefer the page, and maybe it's a certain color, like a yellow or an off-white, but you're going to get more adjustability. I think also some kids really like to turn pages still, but you're going to get more adjustability if you can go to the electronic mode, because you have so many backgrounds, so many text colors, so many fonts. You can display it wider or thinner, like the row of what you're reading. So it depends on if you have like more peripheral vision versus center vision. And you can also add auditory to that, or just do auditory, so there's so many options for that. But learning to navigate it is much easier than it used to be. And you just type in a page, or or speak in a page, and it'll go to the page you want. There's ways to navigate by headings, like chapter headings, or by page number, and you can put bookmarks in pretty easy, and yeah, I just think the technology, like especially the stuff I see with the iPad, I haven't done a lot with a regular tablet, but you work with whatever tech they have, and you see what they're willing to use. And like that totally blind student that a few of us all are familiar with, who's graduated now, he wasn't for the iPhone. He wanted the Android phone, and so we had to make that work. Even though, frankly, our understanding was that the iPhone had better voiceover, like voice features. But he was bright, so he made it work just fine. And And so we just have to adapt to what this, like, where are the students, what is available for them, advocate for what we, whatever we can for them in that situation. But we have to work with school budgets, and then when you want them to use as much of their own personal tech to take it home with them, because the whole idea is, this is their life, not just school, so to use like their cell phone instead of like them borrowing yours or something. So they're
Go ahead.
And to also go along with Mary, what she was mentioning is that the cost of large print books for an entire year for a student can run anywhere $2,400 to upwards towards $4,000. And that was one thing that we really advocated for. And that's the one thing I kept going to Dr. Yana for, was to get those devices, because carrying around those large print books for the students, for one, it's cumbersome. They're bigger. You have to find a special place to store them. But by doing the portable magnifiers or iPad, it allows the students to use the materials that are already in the classroom and to use the regular books, because that's what they're going to have to adapt to once they leave school. I mean, and some kids, if there are large print books available, I know all of us have done this. We've had those students use those books at home if they're available, but it really is not as cost effective to continue to order the large print books when the technology does make it more accessible for the students. I mean, they can do so many different things to really specify the print materials to their own visual preferences.
Now,
and
what
to tag
about
on to that, Braille too, because Braille is not obsolete. It takes some effort to learn it, but there are some kids that, like, that is truly reading versus listening. Listening is a skill and it's a way to get your material, but it isn't the same as true literacy. So that's where, like, if large print isn't going to work for you, Braille is your option. Then if your fingers will read Braille, if you've got the coordination and stuff. But that you can utilize Bookshare with Braille too. There's what they call refreshable Braille displays, where each line you scroll and it renews itself, and you could read it. There's little pins that you would read the Braille, and then also, people still want Braille books, and especially little kids. They need the book sense. How do books work, and the physical layout of a page, or a tactographic, which, is basically a touchable picture. And that takes a different kind of literacy to learn that stuff. But that's kind of going low tech, but that is still very much a part of this.
Well, and that's a good point, though, that I've talked to my students about it. I've said just because it's high tech doesn't mean that it's necessarily better than low tech stuff.
Right, and Braille still has a role in this.
Do you find students using like braillers, like a Braille note taker, those kinds of things?
I don't really have any students that do that, but maybe someone else can talk to that. But I would just opt myself, and this is based on my indoctrination from beginning at the ISD with well, I won't mention her name, but she's somebody we worked with, Rosie, and she just said, well, why don't we use the technology that is common, and so we went with a laptop and then a refreshable Braille display with the laptop, because other fellow students and teachers know what a laptop is. They might not quite understand how the speech and the Braille works on it, but they know what a laptop is, and they can kind of speak their language a little more than if you just went with the refreshable Braille display, which a lot of people do like. But I have not yet come across a student that, not yet in my 8 years of doing this, that I would recommend that for yet. But I'm always open, because there might be a good reason for it. Or maybe the kid just responds to it better and likes it better,
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a student who did like an Apex, but they started with the old tech, and now it's brand new coming out, you know, each year something is different, and they added the screens to it, and it has the touch screen along with the Apex Brailler part of it. So, and they really liked it. So I think it, you know, it just depends on the student, and it depends on what they're exposed to, especially at a younger age. So, and just how much more different things they can do with it. So yeah, but once again, those are extremely expensive. The one that the student that I was working with had was like a $6,000 piece of equipment. So, and on that one, you know, they could still do their email, they could still get Bookshare, all of those kind of things. But you definitely had to be, in order to troubleshoot it, you had to be someone who knew how to use it, or, you know, at least being able to call the company and say, hey, we're, you know, this isn't functioning well, because there's no way like the classroom general ed teacher could just jump in and help with it.
Right.
Yeah, right. So it would definitely take someone who's familiar with the technology.
And that's a good point with that tech. That then requires somebody that has some expertise with that. And your general ed teacher is not going to be able to help with that.
No, and a lot of times even the technology specialist doesn't, because it's such a low incident issue, right? So it really does take someone, whether it's the teacher consultant for the visually impaired or the technologist who specializes in it. But yeah, I think it just depends though. Again, it depends on the student, depends on the budget. And with this particular student, like they had an older sibling who also happened to be blind. And so they had their parents were comfortable with different technology than as well. And so the parents influence a lot of what kind of tech your student would get as well.
Yeah.
So.
Now I remember back when I was working with you guys, JAWS was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Are people still using that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I think people start using it.
I'm sorry. There's so much technology out there now that speaks, you know, and I'm just wondering if you know that, because JAWS is still relatively expensive, but that is still the way to go with kids, you feel?
Yeah.
Yes,
we
and
can
that's,
get
oh,
American
sorry.
Credit Pass for the blind too. I'm sorry, Rosie, but we could
go
get
ahead.
it for that. But there's also like NVDA, and don't ask me what that stands for. NVDA, what does it stand for? But it's an open source screen reader that is becoming a good competitor for JAWS. But a lot of more like official things, JAWS, you know, like in the workplace and maybe during like state testing, JAWS is what's often used. So it's important to train them in that. And they do differ, the keystrokes do differ. I mean, they're similar in some ways, but they're different. So anyway, Rosie, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Is there anything else?
Oh, you're fine. Oh, I was just mentioning with JAWS too, that you have to run that on a PC. And with a lot of schools doing Chromebooks or with doing iPads, you know, JAWS is not a viable option. However, as kids get older and when they go off to, as they transition into college and then into the workforce, predominantly you're going to have PC based, or you're going to have Mac, and you can run JAWS on a Mac as well. And so that's what I'm seeing, at least that transition to the adult workforce. It's JAWS, and actually JAWS, you know, purchased ZoomText, which is a screen magnification program. And now it's Zoom, you can buy the ZoomText Fusion, which has a screen reading component to it. But I just, if you know your student is going to a university or going to college and be taking courses and they plan to go into the workforce, I do feel there needs to be a transition into using that program, even if they were using NVDA or another program prior to it.
Yeah, that's if they needed a screen reader. So
yeah, if they need a screen reader.
Magnification, then they could probably just do straight up ZoomText, you know. But Fusion's not a bad idea, because then you've got the best of both worlds right there.
And about the price is about the same.
It sounds like it's all very personalized. It sounds like there
Yes.
isn't just a one size fits all, you know, we're going to start this student with this, and you've got to be looking down the road too for what.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's just in general what special education is all about, but especially when it comes to technology and vision. And there isn't just like, you know, oh, everybody gets glasses and we can see again. No, it's like, it's such a wide range of vision.
Yeah, saying somebody has a vision problem is vastly different depending on the kid, right?
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so that's where sometimes if schools are doing a specific, specific type of technology, whether it's a Chromebook or iPad, just if they're giving that device to all the students in the school, we, as teachers of the visually impaired, we have to still go in and assess that child on that device. Is that just because they may use that, that may not be the best device for the student.
You were talking before about using magnification to point down onto a document and then point up to what's going on, say, on the blackboard. But that switching back and forth can be a real problem too, can't it?
A lot of our students, because they're using the technology, and let's say they have to shift gaze, they have to look at distance, and now they have to shift back down, it's just that any classroom teacher, you have to allow them additional time for these tasks, because it's the shifting of the eyes, it's refocusing, and it's also the brain has to process where is that information at. And there's a couple different streams that they have to process, written word versus trying to find something on the board and where it's located. So it takes a while for students to process. And I think that's really important for any teachers to know they have the technology. Yes, it gives them equal access, but it will still take them a little longer to do some of the tasks, especially when it involves multiple items of like trying to copy from the board or working in one document and then looking at Google Classroom, looking at a website, and then switching to a Word document. It's going to take the students longer to do some of those tasks.
That's a good point. All right. Well, ladies, thank you very much for your input. This has been really interesting. I think it's been a really good opportunity for our students to kind of see really how this stuff is implemented, that it's just not as easy as giving somebody a magnification or screen reader, and there's a whole lot more to it.
A lot of training that goes involved, that's involved
Yes.
with it too. You don't just hand them a device. There's a lot of training.
A lot of
Hours
training.
and hours.
Yes.
All right. Thank you again.